I tried to steal money from a businessman, but he hired a lawyer. Now I might go to prison. I always thought rich people wouldn't notice a little missing money. When you have millions, what's a few thousand slipping through the cracks? That's why I believe stealing from Richard Carter was a perfect plan. Carter was one of those guys who lived at the top of the food chain. A powerful businessman, always dressed in expensive suits, driving the kind of cars that cost more than an average house. His company, Carter Enterprises, made him a fortune. And he barely even acknowledged employees like me, just another nameless worker in his finance department. I had no power, no future at that company. But I had knowledge of how this system worked. At first, it was just curiosity. I'd stay late at work, digging into financial reports, watching how money flowed in and out of accounts. It was chaos, millions moving around daily, transfers happening at all hours. In that chaos, I saw an opportunity. It wasn't hard. I created a fake vendor account, linked it to a real project, and slowly started diverting small amounts of money into it. Not enough to raise alarms, just a few thousand here and there. Over the course of a month, I funneled about $100 grand into my offshore account. And nothing happened. No alerts, no warnings, no angry bosses calling me into their offices, just money appearing in my account, easy and risk-free. I started to feel invincible. Carter was too busy running his empire to notice a small leak. But then, one morning, I got an email. We need to discuss an urgent matter. Report to conference room B at 3 p.m. The moment I read it, I felt cold. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, trying to convince myself it wasn't about me. But deep down, I knew. I had made a mistake somewhere. They had found something. I tried to stay calm, but my mind raced. What did they know? How much evidence did they have? I spent the next few hours trying to cover my tracks, deleting files, erasing logs, anything I could think of. But I knew it was too late. If they had called me in, they already had something. By 3 p.m., I had no choice. I had to face them. I walked toward the conference room, my heart pounding. I had thought I was smart. I had thought I had everything under control. I was about to find out just how wrong I was. I walked into the conference room, forcing myself to stay calm. The room was empty except for two people, Richard Carter and his lawyer. Carter sat at the head of the table, relaxed, like this was just another business meeting. He didn't even look angry. That made it worse. Next to him was a man in a navy blue suit, perfectly groomed, the type of guy who made a living burying people in legal paperwork. He had a thin smile, like he had already won. "Mr. Davis," the lawyer said, tapping a thick folder on the table. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, my hands resting on my lap to hide the slight tremble in my fingers. The lawyer flipped open the folder. "We know what you did," he said, sliding a few documents toward me. I glanced at them, keeping my expression neutral. Bank records, transaction logs, numbers that meant nothing on their own but together painted a very clear picture. I leaned back in my chair. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lawyer chuckled softly, shaking his head. "That's adorable," he said. "Let me be clear. We have records of the exact transactions you manipulated. The system flagged them, and when we investigated, we found a pattern. We checked security footage. You were in the office after hours on each of the days those transactions were processed." Carter finally spoke. "I don't tolerate thieves," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "And I don't let things slide." My stomach tightened, but I didn't show it. "So, what now?" I asked, keeping my voice even. The lawyer smiled wider, like he was waiting for that question. "The police have already been contacted," he said, closing the folder. "Fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud. You're looking at 10 years minimum." I swallowed, but my throat felt dry. They weren't bluffing. If they had already gone to the police, I was done. Carter leaned forward slightly. "I could have just had you fired, but I want to make an example of you." Panic crept into my chest, but I pushed it down. I needed to think, and fast. There had to be a way out of this. I looked at the lawyer again, watching him carefully. He was confident, too confident. And then it hit me, there was a way out. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to relax. "You're making a mistake," I said. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And how's that?" I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "If you go to the police, your company is going to have a much bigger problem than just me." Carter's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I tapped the folder. If I was able to steal money this easily, that means your financial system is broken. Think about what happens when the police, auditors, and investors start digging into your records. The lawyer's smile faded just a little. He knew I had a point. I pressed on. You think I'm the only one who's ever done this? What if someone higher up is also skimming money? If this case goes public, your company's security will be exposed as a joke. Carter exhaled slowly, considering what I said. He wasn't stupid. He understood the risk. Even if they proved I stole the money, the real damage would be the scandal. Stocks would drop. Trust would vanish. It wouldn't just be my reputation. On the line would be his. The lawyer glanced at Carter, waiting for him to speak. Carter's jaw tightened. I could see him calculating. And that was exactly what I needed. I had given him a reason to reconsider. Now, I just had to push a little harder. Silence filled the room. Carter drummed his fingers against the table, his expression unreadable. The lawyer sat still, his smirk gone, now studying me like I was a puzzle he hadn't expected to solve itself. I had just given them a dilemma. They could send me to prison, sure, but at what cost? Carter's company was his empire. A scandal could shake investor confidence, bring auditors crawling through every transaction, and worst of all, show the world that someone like me had managed to exploit his system. You're bluffing, the lawyer said finally, his voice measured. I shook my head. Go ahead, call the cops. But when this goes public, don't say I didn't warn you. Carter leaned back, crossing his arms. Let's say for a moment that I entertain your little theory, he said. What exactly do you want? I exhaled, trying not to let relief show. This was it. I'll return the money, I said. Every cent. And in exchange, you let me walk away. No charges, no cops. The lawyer scoffed. You're in no position to negotiate. I glanced at Carter. He wasn't reacting, not yet. He was still weighing his options. So, I kept going. Think about it. You take the money back. This all disappears. No headlines, no investigations. No uncomfortable board meetings where you have to explain how some low-level employee got past your security. Carter narrowed his eyes. And what guarantee do I have that you won't try this again? I shrugged. Because I won't get another chance, and I'm not dumb enough to push my luck. The lawyer turned to Carter. Sir, I strongly advise. Carter held up a hand, cutting him off. He stared at me for a long moment, then exhaled through his nose. Fine, he said. You have 24 hours to return every cent. The lawyer tensed, clearly unhappy with the decision, but he didn't argue. Carter had made up his mind. I nodded. Done. Carter leaned forward. His voice was lower now, colder. Make no mistake, Davis. If I ever see your name near my company again, if I even hear a whisper of you trying something like this anywhere else, I won't be so generous. I swallowed, nodding. Understood. Carter looked at the lawyer. Get him out of here. The lawyer didn't bother with a farewell. He just gestured toward the door. I didn't wait around to see if they'd changed their minds. I stood up and walked out, keeping my pace steady. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I had won, but I wasn't safe yet. I still had one last move to make. I didn't go home. Not yet. I knew better than to assume everything was over just because Carter had agreed to my terms. There was still too much that could go wrong. First, I had to return the money. But I wasn't about to do it recklessly. If Carter or his lawyer were smartened, they'd be watching my every move. One mistake, one delay, and they could change their minds. I found an empty cafe a few blocks away, ordered a coffee I wasn't planning to drink, and pulled out my laptop. I logged into my offshore account and set up the transfer resent, just like I promised. It was painful watching all that money disappear, but I reminded myself that it wasn't really mine to begin with. It had been a stupid risk, and I was lucky to be walking away with nothing worse than a bruised ego. As soon as the transfer was complete, I sent an email to Carter's legal team with the confirmation details. Then, I shut my laptop and left the cafe. Now came the hardest part, waiting. I spent the night in a cheap motel on the other side of the city, just in case Carter had second thoughts. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined cops kicking down the door, Carter's lawyers smirking as they dragged me away in handcuffs. By morning, I checked my email. One new message. Funds received. No further action will be taken. Do not contact us again. That was it. No threats. No extra conditions. Just confirmation that it was over. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had won. I wasn't going to prison. I wasn't going to be blacklisted from every job in the country. I was free, but I wasn't stupid enough to believe I was truly safe. Carter might have let me go, but men like him didn't forget. If I ever crossed his path again, he'd crush me without hesitation. That meant I had one last move to make. I had to disappear. Winning the negotiation didn't mean I was out of danger. Carter might have decided not to press charges, but that didn't mean he wouldn't change his mind later. Maybe tomorrow, maybe a month from now, maybe a year. The kind of men who built empires like his didn't leave loose ends, and I was a loose end. I needed to vanish. I spent the next few hours making preparations. First, I wiped everything: emails, accounts, logs. I deleted social media, burned through my phone's storage like I was trying to erase my own existence. Anything that could tie me back to Carter's company was gone. Next, I emptied my accounts. I didn't have much, definitely not the 100 grand I had so briefly owned, but I had enough to start over somewhere else. I bought a burner phone, ditched my old one in a random trash bin, and booked a one-way ticket out of the city. No return plans, no forwarding address. Then, I went to my apartment. I didn't pack much, just essentials cash, clothes, my laptop. The rest didn't matter. I wasn't planning on coming back. As I zipped up my bag, I took one last look around. This place had been mine for years, but now it felt foreign, like a chapter in a book I had already finished reading. I stepped outside, locked the door, and walked away. At the train station, I bought a ticket to another state. Not too far, just enough to put distance between me and Carter's world. Airports were too risky, too many records, too easy to track. A train was quieter, less noticeable. I kept my head down, my burner phone turned off in my pocket. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, that any second now someone would tap me on the shoulder. And I turned to see Carter's lawyer smirking as security took me away. But nothing happened. No one stopped me. No one cared. When the train doors closed and it started to pull away, I finally let out the breath I had been holding. I was really doing this. I was walking away from everything: my job, my life, my identity. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I was free. But freedom always came with a price. And I had no idea what mine would be yet. The train rumbled beneath me as I stared out the window, watching the city shrink into the distance. I kept expecting something to go wrong: a last-minute arrest, Carter changing his mind, some unseen force dragging me back into the mess I had barely escaped. But nothing happened. Hours passed. The city was gone, replaced by stretches of land, small towns, places where no one knew my name. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling slowly. It was really over. For now, I knew better than to think I was completely safe. Carter had let me go, but that didn't mean he had forgotten. If I ever made the mistake of crossing paths with him again, I wouldn't get another deal. That meant I had one job: stay off the radar. No more shortcuts, no more easy money. Just a quiet, normal life. But the thing about people like me, we don't stay quiet for long. 2 days later, I was in a new city, living under a different name. Nothing fancy, just a cheap motel while I figured out my next steps. I had enough cash to survive for a while, but not forever. I needed work. And not just any work, something that paid under the table. No paper trails, nothing that would put me back on the grid. I spent the first day walking around, looking for signs in windows, dishwashing jobs, construction gigs, anything that didn't require a background check. Eventually, I found a small diner that needed someone to work nights. The pay was crap, but it was cash, and that was all I needed. The owner, an older guy named Tom, didn't ask many questions. That was a good sign. "You work hard, you get paid. You don't, you're out," he said, tossing me an apron. That simple. I nodded. Got it. And just like that, I was back to being nobody. Weeks passed. I worked late nights, kept to myself, paid in cash. I didn't make friends, didn't use credit cards, didn't do anything that would leave a trace. But the thing about starting over? It's boring. And for someone like me, someone who once held 100 grand in his hands and almost got away with it, that itch never really goes away. One night, after my shift, I sat in my motel room, flipping through news articles on my burner phone. No mention of me. No scandal. No headlines about an embezzlement case. Carter had buried it, just like I thought he would. That should have made me feel safer. But instead, it just made me restless. I had walked away. I had gotten away with it. But now I was back at the bottom, scrubbing plates, counting pennies, living in a room that smelled like cheap air freshener and regret. And I started to wonder, could I do it again? Not something stupid like last Timonot going after a businessman with a lawyer who could tear me apart, but something smarter, something better. I looked at my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. One search, one idea, just to see what was out there. I smiled. Maybe I had escaped punishment, but the game wasn't over yet.